I've spoken to many grieving parents in my time as a journalist. Each one has left a mark. But none quite like Debbie Duncan, the mother of Jay Slater. Her strength is steely. Her heartbreak, immeasurable. And her fury? It's something that won't fade quietly into the shadows, even after the coroner brought some legal closure to the case of her son's tragic death. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. When the court session finally ended, official words spoken, evidence summarized, theories offered, and the coroner giving what they call a conclusion, there was still an aching hollowness in the room. I was there, notebook in hand, heart in pieces. But no one wore the devastation more than Debbie. They think this is a joke. Before I get to that gut-wrenching plea she made in court, let me take you back. I first spoke to Debbie 2 weeks after Jay's body was recovered. The 19-year-old had vanished while on holiday in Tenerife with friends, sparking one of the most chaotic, contradictory, and emotionally taxing missing persons cases in recent British memory. Rumors swirled on social media like smoke in a wind tunnel. Accusations flew. Keyboard warriors picked apart every detail of Debbie's movements, of Jay's past, of their family's grief. But Debbie never once turned away from a chance to speak, to scream into the abyss, hoping someone out there, anyone, would actually listen. They think this is a joke, she told me during a quiet, tear-stained chat, eyes red, hands trembling. They think losing my son is some kind of game they can comment on, like it's a TV show. But this is my life. My baby's gone. And they call me a liar? A thief? She was referring to the onslaught of online abuse she'd been receiving. Trolls accusing her of misusing the GoFundMe money, others claiming Jay wasn't dead, and even more hurling conspiracies and hate in the comments of every post she made. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I wish they knew what it's like, she said. To sit there and look at the last photo of your son, to hear his voice in your dreams and know you will never touch his hand again. But they just mock. A courtroom of ghosts. When the coroner's court opened its doors last week, it wasn't just a formality for Debbie. It was the only moment she had left to demand that her son be seen not as a viral mystery or a trending hashtag, but as a human being. A boy. A son. There were no cameras. Just reporters, family members, and officials. But as Debbie stood up to speak, papers shaking in her hand, voice cracking but determined, it felt like the walls could barely hold the weight of what she carried. I don't want your sympathy, she began. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose a child and be turned into a villain for surviving it. She told the court about Jay's last messages, about how she had to hear from Spanish police that his body was found near a ravine, and how the autopsy gave little in terms of closure. He was broken, she said, her voice thin. But not just from the fall. He was broken long before, by fear, by isolation, by something none of us really understand. The coroner ruled Jay's death as an accident, likely a fall while trying to make his way back from a remote Airbnb in Tenerife. But Debbie didn't need a cause of death. She needed someone to care. Someone to say, you're not alone. She needed the trolls to stop. The price of public grief. One moment that broke me happened just after the hearing. Debbie stepped outside the courtroom, and as reporters began to gently swarm, she didn't retreat. Instead, she looked straight at the camera and said, "If you've ever written a hateful comment about my boy, if you've ever called me names, if you've ever made jokes about his death, I hope you never lose someone the way I've lost Jay, because you won't survive it. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel." There was no rage in her tone, just a hollow calm. It was the sound of someone who had run out of energy to scream, but had miles of pain left to carry. When I spoke to her later that day, she clutched a folded photo of Jay in his school uniform. He was cheeky, she smiled. Always laughing, always late, always in trouble for his hair being too long. But he had this charm. You'd forgive him anything. Then she added, almost in a whisper, but they didn't forgive him for being young. They punished him for it. Trolls and trauma, a modern curse. Debbie's anger isn't just at the trolls themselves, it's at the world that lets them exist unchecked. She's spoken before about how online speculation spun out of control. One day Jay was a missing person. The next, a meme. A target. A story twisted to fit conspiracy theories. I've had people message me pretending to be Jay, she said, eyes wide in disbelief. They said they had him, that he was alive, that I should send money to get him back. Imagine what kind of person does that to a mother. She kept every one of those messages, just in case one of them turned out to be real. But none of them were. A mother's enduring fight. Despite the coroner's words, the legal boxes ticked, and the evidence reviewed, Debbie knows this journey isn't over. She's not chasing revenge. What she wants is respect. For Jay. For grieving families. For the truth to be valued more than clicks. We live in a world where someone dying becomes a trend, she said. But this wasn't a trend for me. It was the end of my world. Her court plea made one thing clear: she will never forgive those who mocked her grief. And who could blame her? Jay's story didn't end with the court statement. His legacy now lies in what we choose to do with it. In whether we learn to listen, to comfort, to shut down hate when we see it, to treat people, especially grieving mothers, with the humanity they deserve. Epilogue: Jay, the boy beyond the headline. Before we parted ways after the court hearing, I asked Debbie if she wanted to say one last thing about Jay. She looked up at the sky, smiled faintly, then turned to me and said, "Tell them he was more than a name on their feed. He was my boy. My little lad who danced like a fool, cried at sad movies, and told me he loved me every time he left the house, even when he was angry." That's who Jay was. Not a story. Not a scandal. Just a boy who should have come home. And with that, she walked away, shoulders heavy, but head held high. The trolls may never stop. The internet may never change. But Debbie Duncan's love for her son will outlast them all. Subscribe the channel to get such videos.